Hi, I'm Vinny Aggarwal. I'm Chief Economist at Frost & Sullivan and a professor at the University of California at Berkeley. Previously, I spoke about how emerging markets are transforming. Today, I'm going to be speaking about how you can win in emerging markets. And in particular, I'm going to be emphasizing the need to develop not only a market strategy to win in these countries, but also a non-market and organizational strategy. So what does that actually mean? What that means is that you as a manager need to think about your market strategy. We all know that. All managers think about market strategy. Where should you position your product? How much should you charge for it? And those kinds of things. But it's very important, as many analysts have shown, that you also have to think about your non-market strategy. So if you're pursuing a market strategy, say in search like Google, you may suddenly run into trouble with things like privacy. Or if you are running a website in China, you may also run into trouble with the authorities. So what you need to do is think about having both a non-market strategy and a market strategy, and you as the manager have to think of both types of strategy. You can't just leave this to the PR department or the legal department or the government relations department. You need to take control as a manager and develop an integrated market and non-market strategy to succeed in these emerging markets. Now, another aspect of your strategy is to think about how you're going to organize to compete. And many companies talk about this. How should we organize? Should we have an M form of organization? Should we have a global form of organization? Should we have autonomous subsidiaries? And there's some very good research on this by two well-known academics, Bartlett and Ghoshal. And in their effort to look at this question, they came up with two important dimensions. One has to do with what is the pressure for globalization that companies face? As we know from my previous video, we saw that the world has been changing a lot. Globalization has been increasing, so pressures for globalization are much higher today than they were in the 1950s when many countries were pursuing import substitution industrialization and were inward looking. Second, we have to look at the pressures for national responsiveness. To what extent do consumers in different countries demand products that meet their particular needs? And we can see that with the spread of global technology, with the spread of the internet, consumers are becoming pickier and pickier. So if we look at the bottom left-hand corner of this combination of low globalization and low pressures for national responsiveness, we can see that at the beginning in the 1950s and 60s, for example, primarily American companies went abroad, and we call this an international strategy. What does this mean? It means you leverage your core competence. You do this in foreign markets. You try to move knowledge from the center to your affiliates, but the knowledge really does stay in the center. And you have a kind of formal order, rules and procedures that everyone needs to follow in the company, whether they're at headquarters or whether they're in the subsidiary. Now, what happens when you need to actually be more responsive to the domestic market? Bartlett and Ghoshal call this a multi-domestic strategy. And what that simply means is that you now have these decentralized, autonomous subsidiaries, and you have to think about designing products for the local market. If you're in India and you try to sell beef burgers, that's a very bad idea. Hindus generally don't eat beef. Muslims do not eat pork. And so you need to switch to mutton or something else or chicken. So you do need to tailor your product offerings to the market you're in. Subsidiaries can help find these local opportunities, and working with them and the leadership in those subsidiaries may work out very well. So in this model, knowledge is based in each individual subsidiary, and you are very adaptable to the local market. Now, what did companies find as we began to experience more globalization and pressures began to grow? In some cases, in some companies I've worked with, they found that subsidiaries were competing with each other for contracts. And this became a bit ridiculous because now the overall corporate strategy was being impacted by the interest of individual subsidiaries of the larger mother company. So what then happened is we began to see global strategies. A classic example of a global strategy is Apple. Apple makes one product. It makes an iPad, 3, it doesn't make an Indian iPad and a German iPad and a Chinese iPad and a Brazilian iPad. It just makes one iPad. It may have some minor adjustments to that iPad. It may have language and other kinds of things that have to be changed, but in general, it's a pretty uniform product. In this global model, affiliates implement the parent strategy. So once again, going back to the kind of international model, knowledge is mainly at the center, and the focus is on global efficiency, global sourcing, integration of your activities, and you get a lot of competition, production, and control focused by managers, because that's what they're really emphasizing. How do you manage this whole complex process across global boundaries? Now, what happens if you have to do both? That is, you're facing pressures for globalization, and you also are facing pressures for national responsiveness. This is called a transnational strategy. What that means is now you have a lot of diverse markets in the world, but at the same time, you have to globally compete because there are a lot of suppliers to that markets. As countries became more internationalized, their companies began to compete with, say, American and European companies who previously dominated the market. Now, in this model, you have different contributions by different national units, and the challenge that CEOs face is how do you share and develop knowledge worldwide? How do you focus on innovation and flexibility, promote entrepreneurship, and work with your partners? This is actually a very difficult challenge, and few companies can really come up to the pressures that they face and deal with those issues without help from, say, consulting firms or other groups that will teach them how to do this. This is a pretty complicated model to follow, but it can be very beneficial. So let me just summarize what I've been talking about on strategic analysis. Essentially, we can think of a triangle which has 3 parts. It has a market strategy, a non-market strategy, and an organizational strategy. And the market strategy we're very familiar with, such things as cost, what kind of quality, your timing of your entry, what kind of strongholds do you have deep pockets so you can win over a long period of time, and the like. With respect to your non-market strategy, you have to think about what are the issues, what are the interests that you face, what are the institutions in which these non-market issues may be resolved, and what kind of information do you have. And therefore, you have to tailor your non-market strategy to integrate with your market strategy. And finally, as we've already seen, you have to have the right organizational strategy for the kind of global system we're in. So the notion that you just need one particular organizational strategy, or as sometimes consultants come along and say, let's change again, and they keep changing your organizational strategy, this really has to be done keeping in mind what your market strategy is and what your non-market strategy is. So in the end, what you have to think about is all 3 elements, and then you will be able to win in emerging markets. Thank you.